This is K8BYP driving down the road in the restored 1978 Chevy Blazer 350 four-wheel drive. It's an interesting vehicle to drive, being a four-wheel drive and off-road squared-off tires. But these vehicles have always been popular, and they're becoming more popular and being restored. And some of our younger drivers may not be up on some of the particular problems and hints for driving this vehicle. And there's a couple things, especially with the transmission, that are very important to observe to avoid transmission damage. This vehicle has a 1-ton Muncie 4-speed and a 1-ton transfer case, half-ton drive shaft, half-ton rear differential, half-ton front differential. But the tranny and transfer case are 1 ton. And believe me, they are not indestructible, and in fact it's very easy to damage this transmission. And when I get it parked and have some time that I can go without taking too much focus off the road, I'll explain that. But look and see, the air conditioning's on. 1978 vehicle with a totally rebuilt AC system. So it's 85 degrees out. I'm driving down the road and I'm almost cold. So real neat. This vehicle with all this glass is really hard to cool. But the main problem with the transmission is that, yes, it's synchronized in 4 gears forward, but it's also a heavy transmission. And truck transmissions don't synchronize and work as easily as passenger car transmissions. So this vehicle, although first gear is synchronized, it does not like being shifted while the vehicle's moving. So avoid doing that. If you got to put it in low gear when the transfer case is in too high, come to a stop before shifting into second. I got to pause here for oh, there's a green we go. I've shifted into third gear here at 22 miles an hour. Shifting this transmission should not take any force. If you can hear, I'm accelerating up to about 2,000 RPM. This transmission is heavy. It takes time to spin down. That aids the synchronization. So at about 2,200 RPM, I'll let off the gas, put in the clutch, and just push the shifter into fourth gear with no effort. If it doesn't fall in with a click, something's wrong. Either the synchros are bad or it's not being shifted properly. But the gotcha in this transmission is that the reverse gear is not synchronized. Reverse gear is usually engaged from a stop, so there's not much point in synchronizing it. But in this transmission, that reverse gear has a reverse idler, and it is not a bevel gear, it is a square cut gear. And it is extremely easy, if the clutch is dragging, to grind that gear. And every time that gear grinds, it is chipping off pieces of metal. That gear is soft. It's made to break off and make chips instead of breaking a tooth off. And those chips are in there, and there's no filter. As I recall, there's no magnet in this transmission. So it's very difficult to come to a stop and shift this transmission into low or reverse. Not because it isn't synchronized, but because with all the gears, there's a counter shaft that's about 40 or 45 pounds, and it's in there spinning. And it's basically, with any clutch drag whatsoever, that counter shaft will be spinning, and it's a very heavy shaft. That makes it difficult to shift into low gear, granny gear, or reverse, because it's with the vehicle not moving. And even with synchronizers, the synchros don't work, or don't work well, if anything is moving, or if anything's not moving. The synchronizer expects both shafts to be moving, and the synchronizer doesn't match the speed, it matches the phase of the gear. So when upshifting, accelerate the engine, put in the clutch, let off the gas, let the engine spin down, and when the synchro reaches the correct speed, it will phase the gears and drop them in. That's not available when the vehicle is stopped, especially for reverse. So the thing to do for reverse is to come to a complete stop with the clutch all the way in. Shift the transmission into fourth gear, which will stop the countershaft from spinning, then quickly up, over to the right, and down into reverse. Sometimes it won't go into reverse, it wants to hang up. That takes very, very gently, very ever so slowly, letting a little bit of clutch out to just turn the gears over so that square cut gear will mesh. But don't let it grind, because it'll do permanent damage. And 3/4 shift, bump, bump, falls right in. For driving in town below about 38 miles per hour, put the transfer case in 4 low, oddly enough. It's normally in 4 high for street use, but with the transfer case in 2 high, not 4. But for town driving and 2-wheel drive, with the transfer case in 2 high, it takes slipping the clutch about 3 or 4 seconds to get into second gear to take off from a stoplight. That's hard on the clutch. It's also not practical to shift into low gear, which would be easier on the clutch and take off, because this transmission does not like going from first to second. It hates it. Here, I'm stopped at a stoplight. To go into reverse, I would go over till the easy stop, into fourth, then up into second. It's hung up, I'll bump the clutch out just a bit, drops in reverse. Here, I've dropped into second to take off, but it takes 4 seconds of burning on the clutch to get going again. That's bad. 2-3 shift, accelerate to about 2,500, push the shift lever up towards third, just a little bit of pressure. When it's ready to go, it'll fall right in gear. To come out of gear without the clutch, release the gas pedal and gently push down on the shift lever and slowly engage the brake. And very often, the transmission shift lever will just fall into neutral. That's how the semi-drivers do it. They don't use clutch unless they have to. But that allows dropping into neutral without using the clutch to the clutch pedal to disengage the clutch and drop it into neutral. Second gear, drops right in. Take off. Up and over. Click, click. The shifter will make 2 clicks going in. But again, Lord help you if that reverse idler grinds, because every time it grinds, without exception, it's taking metal fragments off. So that's extremely bad. If the vehicle is stopped and it doesn't want to go in reverse, you're better off shutting the engine off, putting it in reverse, and then starting it than to damage that gear. Because you basically can't replace the gear without taking the transmission apart, and you don't want to tackle this transmission unless you know exactly what you're doing. Because this transmission made me cuss and throw things, and I've been working on vehicles for 40 years and I know bearings. But it is a difficult transmission to rebuild for as small as it looks and for a passenger vehicle service. But it is a serious trick to get that transmission apart and put it back together. There's a place in Utah that specializes in these transmissions and transfer cases, and I think they're in Draper, Utah. I don't remember their name, but they know it all. And they sell complete, good quality rebuild kits for the tranny and transfer case, and that's what I used. And I bought spare kits for both. And they're packed away in a nice dry place in the house, so that I've got them in the future, just in case the parts are discontinued. They're common industrial bearings, but the synchro rings are not common industrial parts, they're automotive. So there's a ticket if you've got this transmission, if it's old and damaged and worn out, that's how to get the rebuild, or have them rebuild it for you. And if you're not extremely good and don't have a proper shop, I'd recommend you don't try it, because it's easy to do it wrong. especially when driving commercial vehicles, tractor trailers, dump trucks, and even this vehicle. I'm just kind of logging around town at about 1100 RPM, just not going very fast. The temptation when driving an automatic transmission car is just to step the gas down and zoom off. Don't do that in a vehicle like this, because when you accelerate, you might hear it go wah, 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 as it's picking up speed. That is extremely hard on drive shafts. That's like taking a drive shaft and beating on it with a hammer. And in fact, in a tractor trailer, it's very easy to bust a drive shaft doing that. So don't do it. Also, when driving this vehicle, watch the oil pressure gauge. When the engine is going too slowly, that the oil pressure drops down to about 45, you're going too slow for the gear. Shift gears. Shift to a lower gear. If you have to, stop and shift into second. But don't lug the engine so the oil pressure drops below about 45, which is about middle way of the gauge, because that'll starve the bearings for oil. And the pressure drops real fast after that. KBYP.